We are getting 29 new playable factions for Total War Pharaoh when its massive map expansion releases later this year. So let's just get right into it, guys, because there's a lot of stuff here that I think is really fascinating. The faction update. We're making some big gameplay additions with the Total War Pharaoh update, and in a few places that is more evident than our approach to playable factions. As previously revealed, we're adding in the highly requested regions of Mesopotamia and the Aegean to the conflict alongside their iconic and ancient cultures of Assyria, Babylon, Mycenae, and Troy. That means you'll get to wage war with the most influential forces throughout the region, with each bringing their unique cultural, religious, and political identity. But that isn't all. In a move inspired by past Total War titles, we're also adding in an additional 25 playable minor factions spread amongst each of the cultures, both new and old. These minor factions represent an opportunity for us to feature a wider array of Bronze Age civilizations, kingdoms, and tribes in the game, further adding to the role-playing potential of our sandbox campaign and providing a greater degree of gameplay variety. So first we have Assyria, except it's not really Assyria. They kind of pull a fast one here. It's actually the Mitanni. Players will experience the dramatic rise of Hanegalbat, a major faction that was originally known as the Mitanni before it was conquered and integrated into the sprawling Assyrian Empire. Playing as Ninurta-Apal-Ekur, the king of Hanegalbat, who is aligned with the Assyrian rulers but ultimately strives to fulfill his own grand ambition. The historical narrative is the foundation for our decision to make Hanegalbat the major playable faction, emphasizing its critical role in the power dynamics of the ancient Near East. Meanwhile, Assyria remains a playable minor faction, underscoring the complex and often tumultuous relationship between these two partners. By focusing on Hanegalbat, we aim to immerse players in a rich and historically grounded experience, highlighting the intricate political and military strategies that shaped this fascinating era. Hanegalbat and the wider Assyrian Empire are characterized by their unrivaled strength, discipline, and strategic prowess. Whilst Ninurta-Apal-Ekur's starting territories are abundant in food, they lack direct access to gold settlements, something his more elite armies will have to quickly remedy if they're to continue being a major power broker in the region. What's interesting about this faction leader is that he has adopted the name of his favorite god, Ninurta, as part of his own name. Ninurta's faction is rated as easy in difficulty. Now, an interesting thing about the Mitanni, or Assyrians, I guess we're going to have to decide if we're calling them the Mitanni or the Assyrians, considering that there is an Assyrian faction as well. They start very close to Ursu. Now, that's going to make things way more interesting for Ursu, probably way more difficult as well, because instead of starting with your back to the edge of the map, you'll now be able to be flanked and invaded by very powerful Assyrian factions. So, getting into the army composition here. The armies of King Ninurta focus on quality over quantity, making proficient use of heavy frontline units and chariots to crush the enemy. But quality comes at a cost, forcing the king to assemble his troops in small, well-trained groups that slowly expand in size, which is why his enemies should be wary of his expansionist ambitions, for he could soon amass a force of mighty high-tier units that would be difficult to subdue. Now, I have a question about that. I'm curious if they mean that units are going to actually just, they're going to start off as small unit size, or if they're going to start off not replenished and then have to replenish over time, or if this is just flavor text. I don't know. What does that mean? I don't know what that means. Additionally, they are one of the few Mesopotamian factions with access to cavalry units, giving them a unique advantage amongst their peers on the battlefield. Some of their notable units include the elite light archer cavalry, the Asser horse archers, and the elite heavy cavalry, the Asser horse masters. And we can see them here. Really cool that we're getting cavalry now in Total War Pharaoh. Now, I know that this is anachronistic, okay? It's not historically accurate. The Assyrians did not use cavalry until the Neo-Assyrian Empire, as far as I'm aware. That being said, am I mad about this? Not at all. There's a cavalry mod now available on the Steam Workshop for Total War Pharaoh. And yes, it is anachronistic, but it is so much fun to use cavalry in this game. I know the cavalry is not used in the Bronze Age, but cavalry just works. It fits like a glove, all right? And now that they're adding in, the Homer heroes from the Trojan War, I don't think it's a stretch to add in cavalry and say that, oh, well, that's too far gone. I don't think so. Babylon is far from its former glory. The old Babylonian Empire ended with the Hittite sacking of Babylon by their king Mursili in 1595 BCE. Recently, Assyria's King Tukulti-Ninurta captured Babylon, pushing the Babylonian kingdom into the south of Mesopotamia, away from their capital. However, Tukulti Ninurta was slain in a plot by his son, causing Assyria's might to wane. In the game, you will play as Adad-Shuma-Usur, who already rules from a reclaimed Babylon and strives to oust the Assyrians from Babylonian lands. The Babylonians begin their journey in southern Mesopotamia, a land rich in food but lacking in other vital resources. As an empire seeking to regain its former glory, they employ a strategy of building tall, focusing on slow, protected expansion and investing resources into larger settlements, bigger farms, and stronger citadels. Rated as hard in difficulty, they are favored by the god Marduk. And as we can see here, we have the Babylonian starting position. Looks like it's pretty close to the minor faction Assyria starting position as well. The Babylonian army composition is apparently the opposite of the Assyrian composition. Instead of like really small elite tier units, the Babylonians rely on a bunch of chaff. Nowhere is that more apparent than their dominant use of the cheap Suluhu fighters, who aim to overwhelm their opponents and disrupt their tactical maneuverability. These units come in a variety of weaponized compositions, including spear, sword, and sling variants, making them useful in almost any encounter. Beyond the more disposable ranks of the Suluhu, Babylon can also employ more elite units such as the Taskmaster infantry that buff nearby allies, or the likes of the Babylonian specialists, a utility unit equipped with a variety of special skills but limited combat capabilities. And we can see the specialists here. All right, now we get into the Total War Saga Troy faction, starting with Mycenae. The Mycenaeans are considered one of the earliest recognizable Greek civilizations, and despite their seemingly prominent role in the geopolitics of the region, their historical records are extremely sparse. Therefore, we have chosen to rely on the Homeric cycle to flesh out meaningful characters and explore the possibility of the Trojan War being a historical event, which kind of confirms here, as we could see, that we're getting the heroes from Total War Saga Troy. Mycenae, led by Agamemnon, begins its conquest in western and central Peloponnesus, strategically positioned within easy reach of Crete, the Cyclades, and Attica. In the game, it builds faster and at a lower cost, a testament to its impressive prestige. By asserting cultural dominance over its neighbors, Mycenae establishes itself as a bastion of civilization entitled to rule. Additionally, Mycenae's influence over its territories allows for the recruitment of free units from their respective native rosters. The faction is rated as easy in difficulty and is favored by the god Zeus. So you can see Agamemnon's ugly mug right here. It looks like his mechanic is going to be very similar to the one he had in Total War Saga Troy, where he can recruit from his vassals, except in this case, I guess he's recruiting from native unit rosters for free. And the army composition is basically what his army composition was in Total War Saga Troy. A lot of axemen, heavily armored spearmen, and some powerful skirmishers, but overall weak range units. We don't need to go too far into that, because we already know how that is. Then we have Troy. Troy is led by Priam. There is only one Trojan faction. However, Hector, Paris, and Aeneas are also going to be recruitable generals in the Trojan faction. They start in the southern parts of the Dardanelles, with easy access to Thrace, southern Asia Minor, and the sea travel lanes encompassing the Aegean Islands and looping into northern Hittite lands. Priam's strength lies in forming alliances, gaining the respect and appreciation of like-minded factions, and fostering wealth through these alliances. This faction is rated as moderate in difficulty, favored by the god Apollo. And you can see his starting position here, and his magnificent beard that he's got going on there. Lots of defensive infantry, very low attack, high damage archers, and powerful flanking chariots. Now let's get into some of the notable minor factions. Again, 25 playable new minor factions are coming to the game. Now here's the catch. What makes a faction minor versus major? Well, here's what they say. As the name suggests, minor factions are smaller in gameplay scope compared to their major kin, meaning they won't have access to their own unique set of features such as faction commands or unique court mechanics. Instead, they will take inspiration from the major factions, but will still have an identity that will make them an interesting and challenging choice to command through the turbulence of the Bronze Age collapse. Some of these minor factions contain some well-known characters from a Total War Saga Troy, such as those found within the Mycenaean and Trojan armies. So expect to see the likes of Achilles, Odysseus, Diomedes and Ajax, and Rhesus to be leading their own respective armies. Big shock to see Rhesus here. So we're gonna have Thrace? Is that what that means? If so, that's actually really awesome and unexpected. Where is he? My big question here is when it says they will not have access to their own unique set of features, such as faction commands or unique court mechanic. Now, The question I have there is, does that mean they're not going to have any faction commands or unique court mechanics at all, or are they just going to borrow them from their major kin? If it's that they don't have them at all, I think that's a huge mistake and will make playing as them feel a lot worse than playing as their major cousins. However, if they just kind of steal and copy-paste the mechanics from the major factions, I think that's a totally fine compromise. Hopefully, it's the latter rather than the former. Getting into some of these really interesting minor factions here, guys. First up, the big one that sticks out is Ninurta as Egypt. You can play as Pharaoh Ninurta now from turn 1. I think that's really interesting and cool. I wonder how, again, if the corp system works the way it does with the major factions, I wonder if you're going to have all of the Pharaoh benefits from turn 1. If so, he could end up being a really easy campaign, but still pretty fun to just play as Big Daddy Ninurta and kind of chad your way through all of the upstarts in Egypt. Then we have Ugarit. I'd say this one is the one that I'm most excited about, just because of how that famous sort of clay tablet relief, whatever you want to call it, in the Bronze Age collapse, where the guy in Ugarit is saying, "The sea peoples have sacked my city. Don't you know my army is in the lands of Hatti? May you know it. May you know it." I just love it, guys. I geek out about the Bronze Age collapse, and I'm geeking out about Ugarit, because Ugarit got wiped off the face of the earth, and hopefully we can prevent that from happening in Total War Pharaoh. Damascus. Now, I'm going to be a little bit ahistorical here and say I don't know if the Damascus in this game is Aramaean Damascus yet, because the Aramaeans are the ones who ended up founding Damascus, and it became a big rival of the Israelites, as you know from the Bible. But really cool to see Damascus in here. Hopefully I'm not, mixing up my timeline, and it is Aramaean Damascus, because that would be really cool to have an Aramaean faction to play as. Then we have a couple more Hittite factions that we can play as, so that's cool. And the big standout one to me here is the Al-Ashia. For those who don't know, the Al-Ashia is the island of Cyprus. The Al-Ashia are another faction that was completely destroyed, obliterated, wiped from the face of the earth during the Bronze Age collapse by the Sea Peoples. Then over in Greece, we have the Aeolians, we have the Lycians in Anatolia, we have Ithaca, led by Odysseus. The Boeotians, not sure who's going to lead them. I'm guessing probably either Ajax or Diomedes. Thrace, led by Rhesus. And then over in Mesopotamia, we have a couple factions that I don't really find noteworthy. And of course, we have Assyria. Assyria proper. And again, last thing I'll say about this is that I hope that the minor factions still have mechanics, but that they're just kind of copy-pasted from the major factions, because having them just be bare bones, again, is going to feel really bad. Overall, though, this update is just getting better by the day. This is better than I thought it was going to be. I really thought we were going to have 4, maybe 8 factions total, and I was happy with that. Now, the fact that we're going to be able to play with all of these factions on a 384 region map is excellent. Just for reference, Rome 2 has around 210, 220 regions and 36 playable factions. So now we're going to have, what, 37 playable factions in Total War Pharaoh on a 384 region map. So this is going to be a nice filled out map, guys. And, talk me off the ledge here, but I have hope for this. I have hope for this expansion. I have hope for Pharaoh being a really fun historical Total War game, because the gameplay as it is right now for me is pretty solid. I just really cannot get on with that freaking tiny map. So let me know what you guys think of this down below in the comments. I can't wait to hear what you have to say. Thank you for making it to the end of the video, and take care, and I'll see you in the next one.